Today we are going to be looking at a new feature for Fusion, feeding protocols. The idea behind feeding protocols is obtaining maximum stable intakes. The goal is to have a smooth transition through rations until cattle are established on full feed. It is recommended to work with your nutritionist to build feed protocols. And there is also more information on feed protocols on the Fusion website. Under the blog heading, check out the post for May 2019. To get started, select Fusion Admin. Under the Setup, select Feeding Protocols and click on New. We'll give our protocol the name Yearling Steers. You can make the protocol available for any location. However, if rations are specific to location, you will need specific protocols. Select a location from the drop-down box. It helps to know which rations are available for that location. We can open the rations list and search by currently used rations and by location. We will start by adding steps to the protocol. Each step must have at least one ration, although we can have multiple rations if you want to switch back and forth between rations, like with pulsing. For this protocol, I know that I want 9 steps. Select the ration by clicking on the plus button and picking the ration from the list. Continue with this step until we've selected a ration for each of the steps. I find it easiest to work from the top to the bottom of the protocol, completing each section for each step to make sure I don't miss something. Once we have selected the ration for each step, we can start to set up how bunk calls will be suggested. We can refer to the Fusion documentation by clicking on the question mark, and there is a section on the bunk scores. This explains the criteria of each bunk score, given the numerical value. For this ration, we will select on ration 1, starting new cattle on feed. We want to be aggressive if the bunks are slick and the cattle are aggressive. So we will go a 25% increase with a bunk score of 1. On a bunk score of 2, we would select a 10% increase. Keep in mind that if the bunk score were 15, a 10% increase is 1.5 pounds. For new cattle, even if the bunk score is a 3, an ideal bunk, I still would like to give them a smaller increase. And if the bunk score is a 4, meaning that there is some feed left, then I might choose to keep the bunk call the same as yesterday. For a bunk score of 5, meaning that there is greater than 10% of the feed left over, I'll use a negative value to cut my bunk call. We continue through this process of defining how bunk calls are suggested for each of the steps. As we do the steps in order, the increases will be lower, as the intake levels will be higher for the cattle. As cattle move on to higher energy rations, we can choose to have smaller increases. Another feature in feeding protocols is that for a bunk score of 3, which is ideal, if the bunk score is 3 days of the same, then we can choose to challenge the cattle by giving them a small increase as well. And if they leave some feed, we can choose to wait until it has been there for 2 days before cutting. In most cases, we will want to cut the bunks by a greater amount if they've left feed in higher rations. Once we have assigned bunk scores for each step, we move on to the recommended moving to next step criteria. There's a number of criteria at the bottom, and we can choose to have all or any of the apply. On this, we can select how many days on a ration before moving to the next step. So for ration 1, we'll say 5 days. We can also require that the bunk call increase has been less than 1.5 pounds the previous day. As we move on to higher steps, we may also wish to add that the dry matter intake as a percentage of body weight is greater than or equal to 2%. Keep working through the list of steps until you've completed the criteria for each step. On step 8, which is a full feed ration, I can also select to have the estimated slaughter date is less than or equal to 45 days. My final step in this protocol is an Optiflex ration. So if the cattle are less than 45 days before finish, then it will allow me to go on to this step. Once we have saved the protocol, then we have the option of duplicating it. Select a ration or protocol and go to duplicate at the top. We recommend setting up your first protocol and testing it to ensure everything is set as you want it, and then duplicate the protocol and make the changes necessary for the rations. Your nutritionist may have predefined protocols that can be imported, and then you can edit the rations to suit your feedlot. After setting up the protocol, we suggest trying it on a few pens to start with, until your bunk callers are comfortable using it. From the bunk call window, you will see a window for protocol. Note that when the protocol is selected, it will be on step 1. So we need to check the ration to move the cattle to the proper ration. Now when you assign a bunk score, it will change the call. In this case, it went from 21.7 to 22.24, which is based on the bunk call parameters that we set up in the feed protocol. In order for this to be accepted, we need to click the accept button And also, if at some point we don't want to use the suggested call, we can choose to show current values. Keep in mind that if we have not previously assigned a protocol, it will revert to no protocol. The feeding protocol feature has been added to give you a tool to maximize feeding efficiency, to aid in the training of new bunk callers, and help bring consistency for operations with multiple locations and multiple bunk callers.